In this video I'm going to talk about the war and about the genocide and why they asked where the war is some among the most silly thing to do in the world because nothing will remain by a war. This disaster. And however the war is even if little can take big consequences on the population. For example, let's see the war in Birtawil. The people are traumatized. Even the Tuareg don't want to live anymore at Birtawil and they immigrated again to the east, to the big town on the east or to the western desert. And this isn't good for the economy of Birtawil. But however, there are way more technical things that we can tell about the war. For example, there are the conflict where there is a huge force of interposition. Suppose there are three forces. So there are the terrorists, there are the leftists, and there are the rightists. And suppose that they fight each other for the human right and for their civil right. So suppose that they care more about the economy for a consequence of human right, and that they collide each other and the government can stop them. In this case, there will be three strong factions because the mid-right is strong already because of the promises about the economy and peace and stability, and now the left is strong already because of the game of power, of the big power, and the terrorists are always strong because they play of support and they aim to kill the people. Or there are these three strong factions. We have to stop them both three. How to do? There are the diplomatists that can act apparently to do right thing like that. For example, indicting peace deal and trying to use Mohammedan figures to come closer to the leader of the enemy army and stop the war. However, there are the negotiators. The negotiators are some among the most evil among them because they do everything with money and they care only about the money that they receive. However, the negotiators are some among the most intelligent because the negotiators are really among the best to stop the war because the enemy will be paid off even with some single sum or little money because at any rate in the poor country there is always war, and when the war is in the poor country the negotiator can give money to everybody, so why to distribute money for the welfare about war. Then there are of course the the peacekeeper, which are comparable to a sort of worldwide police, which are used to stop the war violently, provoking the enemy general. So there are other factions which there are other things to stop the war. For example, if you want to commend the general for the killing of children, you can demonstrate that the conflict is either destructive and very paramilitarist. For example, where the civilians are dead if they don't listen, or the civilians are bombarded involuntarily or voluntary to its systematical target. For example, when Iron Rebellion launch a bomb at civilian to bad sources of possible insurgency and killing political oppositor, but they are still civilian. For example, when Iron Rebellion killed the civilian accidentally, for example by launching a bomb on a military target, supposing that don't supposing that there is an house near and maybe the big bat explosion might explode the home, or the bomb might miss because of a bad bitchy betty and it might hit the home. In this case, we are calling out to the humanitarian emergency, to the humanitarian disaster, and to the civilian death. A unit indemnize the death by insubordinating, which is illegal, by minimizing, which diffuse international discontent, and by indemnizing, which is to pay the family of the dead, to rescue the victim, and to start operation or rehumanization of the conflict. Or if the conflict is inhuman, for example, is more little to be transhuman, it's not that they're gonna be dead. For example, if there are people to be bombarded and you need to bombard the people by the sky, you can see everything by the sky, but well, there are technology, and if the technology wrong, you need to replace the technology with a better technology, a better rural engagement. Or if there are rural engagement that are too severe, you might probably lose the war. Or if there are rural engagement that are not too severe, You might probably kill a civilian while doing your warfare if you're gonna attempt to bomb match. For example, if I play Rebel Link right now, you can shoot around 100 strike in a single month if I have the opportunity. This is to bad the sources of the rebel, not either to kill the civilian occasionally. But if I have the occasion to kill a civilian to bad the sources of the rebel, I do it just cause it's a missile. For example, if I eliminate a civilian for fake, it's not as if I eliminated for real. But in fact, the game is all folk and is made to train you in case of a real war. So I think that we are in milsim. So if there is a milsim, you can kill civilian, but consider that is not a legal move in most of the milsim. Except if you are playing the terrorists. And if you are playing the terrorists, expect to be blamed because it's a toxic play rule for the soldier. In fact, I try to play boys and to indemnize every that in the match. And I also do concession like withdraw my coalition trooper from extra division, etc. etc. To make a claim of authority, you can blame on the death troopers, for example, and on the economy. If the economy of the conflict is unsustainable and the time is too long, it's called an exos conflict because the rate is an access which is a far planet which is unreachable and costs to reach. A human practically. So at any rate, a human conflict, more than a exodus of the humanity, is more of a bad thing to do. And this could be a big point for the peace. Because, for example, with the conflict in Ukraine, we're seeing any kind of extremist rising, even diplomatists are through trying to stop the war, but even the good diplomatists which are trying to stop the war. So at any rate, we will withdraw all the fences like what happened in Russia and Ukraine and in Israel and Palestine. Of course, there are even the fences in Sudan, but what we are mostly care about big conflict. The Sudan is a country where there's peace, where the peace is only momentary and everything's destroyed, and you don't even stand on a peace. Is there would have been very diplomatists would have stopped immediately, and everybody would have possibly gotten what they wanted. So I think that we need to stop the war. The war is to imposing a form of authority. To imposing a form of authority. So remember that as well if you're trying to stop the with authority. So for example, if there are people trying to arrest the fact they increase their authority, you can bother their authority. For example, if I launch a bomb on your tank, they use it to stop the war. No, if you launch a bomb on your tank, they use it for a humanitarian intervention. That maybe isn't humanitarian, that maybe it's just terrorist. You could even lose authority for the tank that. For example, the combatter inside, and at the moment you try to use to launch the tank on the front line, it doesn't mean nothing because I think that you hasn't taken more authority. But this is a brutal way to stop the war, and this is very more sound-based than the outreach that we can put on this video. So you will never understand a thing of similar, but however, understand me if you try to battle the authority. The better thing is to do it with bomb, but if you are a statistic, you can even do it normally. So, for example, if you are about to be bombarded, you can stop it and blame it on the bomb. The bomb are used to do nothing to your population. For example, we dive under the terror of the gun, and we aren't afraid by face your bomb because you shall be afraid by bombarding us, because you will lose money and it's either useless. And we already live under the pressure of the gun. It wouldn't do us nothing. We go to the press in public plaza and to destroy you. And I think that the two major way to stop the war. So I think that if you want to blame on the combatant, you can. But neither to blame on their family and to blame on the fact that they died. For example, you can always insult a combatant because he died. You have to insult a combatant because he's doing dangerous action. And maybe the fact that he died is the point to close the beef. Because I think right, if there is a combatant that we don't blame him. So he hasn't to be afraid to go to war. You shall be afraid to go to war. Because this will respond to the consequences. But I think right, we don't blame on the combatant. So this is how to do. First of all, you shall blame on your general. Your general to combat, send you to combat. and this make you a certain monster which kill children and people which has family and which will cry for several that you made it. Maybe you open fire suppression on your formation and you kill them 500, 100, who know. However, you kill so many people that the family will cry. At least 1,000 family will cry from you. So why didn't stop the war? At any rate, you are a man of valor, so why you didn't want to blame on your general? I suppose the spot said all the generals that want to do the war. Neither all the generals that want to do the milsim, but if a general is a lead, certainly it isn't a good thing for a country, because it could lead to a lot of war. If a general just war, and then the country just war for the general, it will be very democratic, because at any rate the general will be deposed during the war. But however, we have to prove that most of the upper class in Africa, for example, is ignorant, while there are people in the medium class that are way more arrogant in culture. So why to don't depose them? For example, blame them on their authority till their death. This should be an option if you really want to stop the war. Or however, we don't want to kill anybody, and we don't try to